You can tell this is a Baptist church. Y'all are in the back row. Uh, middle row's good. Middle row's good. You know, that's kind of, you're leaving room for those others, but you're not, that's good. That's good. I like what you're doing there. So, so yeah, good morning. Welcome back. Today is January 26th, a red letter day. Red letter day in has anybody guessed that I was a history major in college? I was, in fact. It was on this date that Edward III became the King of England. Edward III, I know. I was like, wow. Edward III was King of England for a very long time, something like 40, 50 years. Had multiple sons. His first son was, what was his name? I forget. I think it was also Edward, but he was known as if you ever hear about the Black Prince, the Black Prince was Edward III's first son. He was, and again, because Edward III lived so long and was king so long, his son, the Black Prince, never became king. His son did. His son was was Richard, who became Richard II, famous for the Shakespeare play, Let Us Sit Upon the Ground and Tell Sad Stories About the Death of Kings. And his life kind of led into what we call the War of the Roses, which were between the different sons, the families of the different sons of Edward III. But he died on this date. I'm sorry, he became king on this date in 1340. In 1564, the Pope issued the decree Benedictus Deo. Benedictus Deo, big deal. This was actually the summary of all of the decrees that came out of the Council of Trent. Any people who grew up Catholic here in the room? Okay, so the Council of Trent was the full official response to the Protestant Reformation. And a lot of how Catholics practiced church for the next 400 years was determined based on the determination of the Council of Trent. For example, it was at the Council of Trent that, and in this Benedictus Deo, that Latin and the Latin Vulgate was determined to be the official Bible of the Catholic Church. It was also the first time that the Catholic Church, or in an official church council, had sat down and said, these are the books of the Bible. Now, I know when you're a Protestant or Baptist, you look at you say the Council of Constantinople. Well, within the Catholic Church, the Council of Constantinople is not considered one of the official church councils. There's only been like 7 of them, but it confirmed Latin. It confirmed the role of the priest. It also confirmed that the church and the Bible were of equal importance, equal authority. And that the church pre-existed the Bible. So, and this is an important point because sometimes when Baptists or Protestants look at the Catholic Church, they say, well, you guys, you believe the church is important and we only believe the Bible. And the Catholic Church response would be, well, who approved the Bible? And they say, well, it was the church. Which came first, the church or the Bible? And they say, well, the church did. Okay, so again, sometimes people say that in the Protestant universe as if it's a slam dunk, boom, drop the mic, walk out the room. Well, to a Catholic who knows his or her Catholic doctrine, it's not. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just not saying that's not going to make a Catholic go, oh, I never thought of it that way. But that was a lot of other things. The role of the sacraments was confirmed, that the fact that there were 7 sacraments. Okay, extreme unction and marriage and all of that came out of the Council of Trent. Okay, so a lot of, just like a lot of how we do church today has more to do with the Protestant Reformation than the first century church in terms of like the details. A lot of how the Catholic Church for 400 years, boom, was because of the Council of Trent. Of course, that was all changed because of Vatican II. A lot of that, I shouldn't say all of it, but a lot of that was changed because of Vatican II. So that's the big church event for the day. Other fun little things. And today is Australia Day in Australia. It's on this date in 1788 that the Union flag was hoisted at Sydney Cove. Okay, so it's considered Australia Day. It's also called Invasion Day by the First Nations people of Australia. That would just kind of a difference in perspective. In 1875, I should have, this is where I need a sound effect machine. But it was on this date in 1875 that the electric dental drill was created. That's my idea of a sound machine. In 1960, where were you on this date in 1967? Was anybody around here for example, in the area in 1967? Well, I know what you were doing. You were either sitting inside or watching somebody shovel snow, because today is the day of the 1967 snowfall kind of thing. And it was on this date that the court case Roe versus Wade was decided. Roe versus Wade, which expanded on previous Supreme Court decisions to determine that because the Constitution guaranteed a right to privacy, that right to privacy included the right to have an abortion. That was decided on this date in 1973, overturned 2022, 2023. I forget when it was. 2022, I think, was when it was finally overturned. So that's it for the day. That was the Council of Trent. That was a big one. No, there's that's a fun one for me, at least. The Council of Trent. It was from 1538 to 1563. They lasted a long time. They had like 35 different sessions. It went through 3 popes. All right, we're in 1 Samuel, the book of Samuel. Today we're in chapter 23. Hopefully we're going to knock off 2 chapters here, telling one of the better known stories of David. Today it's I've titled it Saul's Admission, I Know. And in verse 23, now previously we've started, I can't remember, we've started watching another television show where they have that previously on. Previously on, in my mind I got this previously on the book of Samuel. David, joined by Abiathar. No, wait, what's the name of the priest? Abiathar, Abiather. Abiathar, who is the great-great-grandson of Eli, has joined David, and they are both on the run from Saul. Okay, so this is David's time in the wilderness. We gave that example last week. And the interesting thing is, to me, this is David at his best. And I think there's an interesting lesson there, that when you look at this, you see this is David at his finest, when he's on the run from Saul, which kind of there's at the risk of spiritualizing the text or drawing conclusions that aren't there. There is kind of a lesson there, that sometimes we're the best when we're under the most pressure. That when things aren't going our way is when you really show who you are, kind of thing. It's it's easy to talk about how much you love snow on a nice sunny day, but when it's the snowstorm of 1967, it's a little different story. So, chapter 23, beginning with verse 1, when David was told, "Look, the Philistines are fighting against Keilah," it could be Kyla, but I'm going to pronounce it Keilah, and are looting the threshing floor. He inquired of the Lord, saying, "Shall I go and attack these Philistines?" The Lord answered him, "Go, attack the Philistines and save Keilah." So David hears that the Philistines are attacking Keilah, which is a western border town in Judah. Now, it's on the border. Does anybody remember your geography of, if it's a western border town of Judah, what is it on the border of?
Gaza?
No. Well, yes, but it wasn't Gaza then.
Well, you know what I'm saying.
No, because that's not the right answer, though. Who lived in the area that we now call Gaza? The Philistines. Okay, so this is the Philistine area. It's on the border of the Philistine area. Okay, so this is close to there. So it's an easy town for the Philistines to kind of raid and go back. And so he says, here the Philistines are fighting this. No matter what is going on, okay? So, we have this give and take in chapter 21 and 22 between David and Saul and all of that, and Jonathan and all those things going on. And then David hears, hey, Philistines are fighting, okay? And David inquires, should I go? Because, he's like, am I on the outs? Am I still? And should I, And the Lord says, yes, go, okay? He inquires of the Lord. And note that fighting the Philistines is a top priority for David. Regardless of what's going on, David remembers his mission. Okay, his job, what Saul has brought him in to do, is to lead a group of men and go out and fight the Philistines. So when he hears about the Philistines, it's like, drop everything, go fight the Philistines. Okay, he inquires of the Lord, shall I go and then fight? But David's men said to him, here in Judah we are afraid. How much more then if we go to Keilah against the Philistines and against the Philistine forces? Now, keep in mind, he's on the run from Saul. So what's happening here, or what they envision, perhaps, is that they're going to go over here to where Keilah is, and on this side you're going to have the Philistines, the enemy, and on this side you're going to have Saul's forces, and it's kind of putting them in the middle between two forces. So it's a reasonable expectation to say, whoa, David, hey, hold on, yeah, let's think this through a bit, okay? And again, this is not the first time. Let's see. Note that fighting the Philistines is the top priority. David inquires of the Lord, shall I go attack these Philistines? Okay. The Lord says yes, but David's men are skeptical. Now, this is not the first time in the book of Samuel that the army questions its leaders. Okay, so again, you didn't have, again, with Saul and the honey and all of that, to a certain extent, there's an obey. We'll obey, but other times they go, whoa, wait a minute, do we want to do this? And you see, there's a couple of other examples today. You see where David's men are questioning him, say, you do this or don't do that, kind of thing. All right. So David's like, okay, rather than just say, hey, I'm the boss, do what I say. David's like, okay, I hear. Let me go to the Lord again. Okay. So David's men here, if we go, it's out of verse 4. Once again, David inquired of the Lord. Okay, now I'm curious, like, what this conversation was like, how this was. Okay, David, Lord, I know you told me to go, but the guys brought up some really good points here. Maybe you weren't considering this when you answered me the first time. I don't know. I don't know how it went. Okay. And the Lord answered, go down to Keilah, for I am going to save the Philistine. I'm going to give the Philistines into your hands. Now, perhaps the first time it was just David and the Lord. Maybe the second time it was David in front of all of the other people, which raises the question, how does David inquire of the Lord? Okay, so David, again, this is not the first time. David asks again, and again, the Lord says yes and promises success. Now, how does David inquire of the Lord? Okay, we don't really know the answer to this. There's any number of ways. I give several. He could just in prayer. It could be a conversation. He could be walking with the angel of the Lord. We don't know. And don't forget, he's got a prophet with him, and he's got a priest with him. Okay, and the priest has the ephod, which is kind of the uniform, I guess, the royal or the priestly uniform, the priestly outfit, and it could have the human and the Thurman, where kind of an answer yes or no kind of questions, and later on we see that the Lord seems to answer in a yes or no fashion, which kind of makes you think, okay, this is how he's doing it. He's doing it through the priest. So we don't really know how David inquires of the Lord. Okay, it could be any number of things. Again, this guy is, the writer is looking back on the story, and okay, he got the yes, and okay, go attack. I'm going to give success. Okay, could have, like I said, could have been a conversation. It could have been just in prayer and a vision. Could have been any number of ways. We really don't know how he did it, but he goes. So David and his men went to Keilah, fought the Philistines, and carried off their livestock. Okay, again, this is, so that suggests to me that, he kind of went a little beyond Keilah, grabbed some of the Philistines' cows and said, hey, got to make a living. Guys got to work here, guys got to eat. right? So they grab some of the Philistines' livestock. He inflicted heavy losses on the Philistines and saved the people of Keilah. Right? This is great, right? Hey, this is, you'd think they'd be happy. You'd think they'd be, wow, what a great guy David is. We appreciate you're doing this for us here, money. Right? Now Abiathar, son of Ahimelech, had brought the ephod down with him when he fled to David at Keilah, which, to me kind of says, okay, he's kind of telling you he used Ahimelech, I'm sorry, Abiathar to inquire of the Lord. But so now you think David's a hero, right? David's the hero, his men are heroes, Keilah's happy, the Philistines are out of the way, right? That's how this story should end. Well, guess what? It's not. Okay. Saul was told that David had gone to Keilah, and he said, God has delivered him into my hands. Now, it's interesting here when you see Saul, how Saul sees events, God working on his behalf. Okay. And, it's interesting because we kind of do the same thing. Okay. So, I was there just because I was holding a gun. The guy voluntarily gave me his money. God gave me the money. I'm not saying it's quite that way, but God is saying, okay, God has delivered him. God did all of this for me. Okay. This is Saul's opinion. And he said, God has delivered him into my hands, for David has imprisoned himself by entering a town with gates and bars. Okay, so Keilah is apparently a closed or a walled city. Okay, now David has been in a walled city before. If you remember, how did he escape when Michael covered him up? He was let down the wall, right? Well, the trouble is, he's got 600 men with him. So it's kind of hard to let 600 men down the wall. It's possible, but it's going to take a while. And it's going to get tiring after a while. Okay, so Saul thinks David is trapped. So when he hears the story, Keilah, he went where? He went to Keilah? Wait, he's in the city of Keilah. There's a wall. There's a gate. I can get there. They're my people. Okay. So when let's see, for David and Saul called up all his forces to battle to go down to Keilah to besiege David and his men. Now this is exactly what David's men thought was going to happen. That suddenly they're going to be stuck between all of Saul's men on one side and the Philistines on the other. Okay, so this is exactly what David's men thought was going to happen. When David learned that Saul was plotting against him, he said to Abiathar the priest, bring the ephod. David said, Lord God of Israel, your servant has heard definitely that Saul plans to come down to Keilah and destroy the town on account of me. Then he has two questions. Will the citizens of Keilah surrender me to him? Will Saul come down as your servant has heard? Lord God of Israel, tell your servant. So he asks these two questions. Okay, are these guys going to give me up? Can these guys who should be very happy, that should be like thankful that I rescued them from the Philistines? I mean, they were raiding your threshing floors, and David took care of that. Okay, and are they going to give me up? And is Saul coming? Okay, so the Lord, and again, the way this conversation goes suggests that there's a yes/no component, which means he's going through Abiathar and ask the Lord. The Lord is, using the various tools he has, comes back with a yes answer or no answer. And again, so he says, second question is, will Saul come down as your servant has heard? Lord God of Israel, tell your servant. And the Lord said, he will. Okay. So the city of Keilah. So hearing that Saul is coming, David asked the Lord two questions. Will the citizens of Keilah surrender me? Is Saul coming to attack me? Okay. The Lord answers the second one. Then David asks the first one again. Both answers are yes. Okay. He will. So David, and then in verse 12, again David asked, will the citizens of Keilah surrender me and my men to Saul? And the Lord said, they will. Okay. So, you'd think these guys would be happy, but they don't want to go against Saul. Because, David, we appreciate what you're doing, but, hey, the big picture is Saul's got more men than you, and sorry, right? They will. So David and his men, about 600 in number, left Keilah and moving from place to place. When Saul was told that David had escaped from Keilah, he did not go there. That is to Keilah. Okay, that is to Keilah, not to Keilah. It's a completely different thing. Okay. The Lord answers the second one first. Then David asks the first again. Both answers are yes. So David escapes with his 600 men. And we find out later that he's traveling with their families. Okay. So there's a lot of people David is moving around. Okay. Now, at this point, the families may not, later on, we definitely know the families are with him, but at some point, the families join up. But even with 600 men, that's a lot. That's a big group to be moving in and out of a city. Okay. And you're not going to sneak out of a city of 600. So clearly, the citizens of Keilah, once David is out the door, they know he's out the door. They send messages to Saul going, hey, Saul, listen, you don't need to come. And he doesn't. Okay, so David escapes, going from place to place. So David stayed in the wilderness strongholds and in the hills of the desert of Ziph, which is in southern. He goes to, let's see, the Lord answers the same. David escapes to Ziph, which is in southern Judah, and Saul follows him there. Okay, in the desert of Ziph, day after day, Saul searched for him, but God did not give David into his hands. Now, remember when I talked about, how the narrative is driven in a narrative text, or how the story is driven, or how you determine what is actually going on. Okay, so you have what the people say is has a certain level of accuracy, but the most accurate statement is what the narrator says. So earlier, the writer says, Saul said, God has given David into my hand. Okay, that's Saul speaking. Okay, so that's Saul's opinion. The writer is just recording Saul's opinion. Okay, Saul is wrong. God did not give David into Saul's hand. Quite the opposite. Okay, now the narrator tells us God did not deliver, lest you think Saul is correct. God did not deliver. And I think the point there is to just show, listen, Saul thinks he's speaking on God's behalf, and he's not. Okay, he's really disconnected from what the message of God is. Okay, so now you've got the king of Israel and the future king of Israel playing this cat and mouse game in the southern area of Judah, going back and forth. Okay, day after day, Saul searched for him, but God did not give David into his hands. Okay, so he's in his southern. While David was at Horesh in the desert of Ziph, he learned that Saul had come out to take his life. And Saul's son Jonathan went to David at Horesh and helped him find strength in God. Now, this is Jonathan's last conversation with David. Okay, it's not the last time. We will see Jonathan one more time. Basically, is to say Jonathan died. But so, for all practical purposes, this is Jonathan's last appearance, which makes me sad because I really have come to like Jonathan a lot. Okay, he is like the greatest of all time here. This is the guy who should be king. The man who should be king. He would be king. Okay, if Saul had just toed the line, Jonathan would be king. And probably there's a line in Hamlet when Hamlet at the very end, Hamlet, I don't want to give it away, but let's just say a lot of people die and Hamlet doesn't become king. I won't explain why, but a guy comes in, looks at Hamlet and says, it's too bad, this is the Stan translation or paraphrase, is that he would have been a good king. So the guy says of Hamlet, okay? And it's like Jonathan would have been a good king, okay? I think, it's my opinion. Jonathan would have, everything indicated that Jonathan would have been a good king. And he comes, but he says, don't be afraid, he said. Okay, well, Jonathan arrives first, and this is his last conversation with David. And Jonathan says three things. Don't be afraid, he said. My father Saul will not lay a hand on you. You will be king over Israel, and I will be second to you. Even my father Saul knows this. Okay? And so the three things I'm just noting that he says is David will be king. You will be king. Okay? Jonathan will be second, and even my father knows this. Actually, he says four things. He says, Saul's not going to hurt you. You will be king. Jonathan recognizes that David is under God's protection. Okay? You will be king. I will be second, and even my Father knows this. Okay, and I've got that, down at the bottom as far as the quotation for the day. That you will be king, even my Father knows this. So Jonathan knows that Saul is fighting a battle he is not going to win. This is one of the things about Jonathan. Jonathan knows that Saul is fighting a battle that he is not going to win. And when Saul calls Jonathan at the end to come fight this battle with me, and the Philistines, and he knows Saul is doomed, Jonathan goes. So it's kind of an interesting, one of these days, someday, I want to do a series of examples, kind of stories of people in the Bible who operated without a net. Okay, I mean, just knew they weren't going to succeed, but did it anyway. Did what God told them anyway. Okay, you can think of like Joseph. Joseph, and had no reason to follow God. Right? There was no promise that Joseph was going to be made popular, or that would get a powerful position. Yet he followed God anyway. Okay, the three Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are in the book of Daniel, where they said, bow down. The king says, bow down to me, or I'm going to throw you into the fire. And they say to him in that text, it says, our God can rescue us from the fire, but even if he doesn't, we're still not going to bow down to you. Okay, just operating without a net. Okay, Josiah later on in the Old Testament is told that the kingdom is doomed. The kingdom is doomed, and Josiah, knowing this, puts in a lot of worship reforms anyway, knowing that the kingdom is doomed. And it's like, you think about that. Like we want to, we want a backup plan. We want to make sure that we're going to succeed. It's like, how many of you would say, listen, the church is going to do this thing. We're going to have this operation, or we're going to have this activity, and it's doomed. It's going to fail. Sign up here. Okay, how many of you would sign up for that? I'm not saying, of course I would, but yeah, I mean, our tendency would be to say, well, there's no hope. Why would we do that? Yet we've got example after example after example of person that there's no hope of success. Yet Jonathan goes into this battle knowing he's going to die at the end. Sorry, I've got ahead of myself, but Jonathan does that to me. I'm sorry. What's interesting here is the one thing, again, this is Jonathan talking. Okay, so this is the truth according to Jonathan. Jonathan envisions a future where David is the king and he's like the second in command, the prime minister, okay, the general of the army. Okay, that perhaps is how he envisions it. Of course, that's not what happens. Okay, but that's how he envisions it. But he said, Jonathan makes three statements. David will be king. Jonathan will be second. And even my father knows this. Okay, if anybody knows what Saul knows, Jonathan does. He says, my dad knows this. Okay, so again, maybe it's one of those situations where somebody is denying something, and maybe you've had an experience with this, where somebody is denying something, and you know that he or she knows that it's true, whatever it is they're denying. But this is the last time we see Jonathan. The two of them made a covenant before the Lord. Then Jonathan went home, but David remained at Horish. Okay. So the Ziphites, verse 19, the Ziphites, these are it's actually, there's a town in the desert of Ziph called Ziph, and it's usually thought that the residents here, the Ziphites, who are from Judah, Judahites, Judeans, Judites, are of the tribe of Judah, went up to Saul at Gibeah and said, is not David hiding among us in the thresholds at Horish on the hill of Hakliah, south of Jeshimon? Now, your majesty, come down whenever it pleases you to do so, and we will be responsible for giving him into your hands. Okay? The Ziphites, like the Kelites, sell out David to Saul. Okay? And there should be a Y there. This is great. This was the one I couldn't remember. I just remembered it. That was close. They guarantee it. They guarantee it. There should be a Y there. It should be They. This is what threw me. I forgot the Y. So I'm like, the G it. The trying to make a sense. They guarantee it. They just like, now on the one hand, David hasn't done anything for the Ziphites. He hasn't rescued them from the Philistines. Okay, they're in southern. They're not at a great threat from the Philistines as much as the citizens of Keilah are. Okay, but they like, hey, David. Even though David is from Judah, David's one of them. They say, let's give him up to Saul. They go up to Saul. So Saul is back home. They go find Saul. Maybe they think they're going to get a great benefit out of this. I don't know, but we guarantee it. We guarantee it, right? We will be responsible for giving him into your hands. Saul replies. Saul, wants some more information. Saul replied, "The Lord bless you for your concern for me." So now he's giving the blessing for them, that you turned over God's anointed to me, kind of thing. Okay, for God, the Lord bless you for your concern to me. Go and get more information. Find out where David usually goes and who has seen him there. They tell me he is very crafty. Find out about all the hiding places he uses and come back to me with definite information. Then I will go with you. If he is in the area, I will track him down among all the clans of Judah. Okay. So Saul asks the Lord's blessing on the Ziphites, but wants more information. Where does he usually go? Who are his associates? And what are his hiding places? Okay, because this is a distance. I mean, I don't, 40, 50 miles. Okay. But he doesn't want to make the trip just to find one guy because, David knows people too. He's going into Judah to catch somebody from the tribe of Judah. So it's like, this is not the most friendly territory that Saul can go into. So he wants to know exactly where David is. I want the details. I want to know exactly where he is. Okay. So they sent out and went to Ziph ahead of Saul. Now David and his men were in the desert of Maon in the Arabah south of Jeshimon, just kind of in that southern area. Saul and his men began the search, and when David was told about it, he went down to the rock and stayed in the desert of Maon. When Saul heard this, he went into the desert of Maon in pursuit of David. Okay. David escapes to the desert of Maon, but not before, and this is just a side note, not before writing Psalm 54. Now, I haven't really mentioned much about the Psalms, but if you look at Psalm 54, it says, from the director of music, from the director of music with stringed instruments, a song of David, when the Ziphites had gone to Saul and said, is not David hiding among us? And it says, save me, O God, by your name, vindicate me by your might. Hear my prayer, O God, listen to the words of my mouth. Arrogant foes are attacking me. Ruthless people are trying to kill me. People without regard for God. As in Saul. Surely God is my help. The Lord is the one who sustains me. Let evil recoil on those who slander me. In your faithfulness, destroy them. Now, this verse 5 is interesting because it's going to, a similar concept is going to come up a little bit later. I will sacrifice a freewill offering to you. I will praise your name, Lord, for it is good. You have delivered me from all my troubles, and my eyes have looked in triumph on my foes. Okay. So not before writing or having somebody write Psalm 54 for him. So Saul, then in verse 26, you get this story. Now there's a couple of different ways to look at this particular story. It says Saul was going along one side of the mountain, and David and his men were on the other side, hurrying to get away from Saul. As Saul and his forces were closing in on David and his men to capture them, okay, so hold that thought for a minute. So a couple people look at this as saying, okay, so Saul is like one picture is you got this whole, you guys have seen the, where the two people are on the other side of the tree and one goes one way and one goes the other. You kind of have this going around this mountain like this. Another way to look at this description is to say Saul has split and are coming in on David. So David is like about to be captured. As Saul and his forces were closing in on David and his men to capture them, a messenger came to Saul saying, come quickly, the Philistines are raiding the land. Then Saul broke off his pursuit of David and went to meet the Philistines. That is why they call this place Selah Hamakaloth, And David went up from there and lived in the strongholds of En Gedi. For Saul comes very close to capturing David, but Saul hears that the Philistines are raiding the land, so he broke off the chase. For Saul, like for David, defeating the Philistines is the top priority. The only thing that can keep Saul from capturing David is the Philistines. And this is one of those kind of examples of where, what got into the Philistines' head to attack right then. It's like, well, the Lord uses interesting things. So the Lord puts the idea in the head of some Philistine commander somewhere. Hey, this is a good time to go attack, and he does. And as a result of this, now people, there's a battle going on up here, but as a result of that, and I think David is like very close to being captured here. David and his men. Saul takes off. David escapes. Okay, and they go. And David went up from there and lived in the strongholds of En Gedi. Okay, En Gedi is a place in the desert, southern desert in Israel. I've been there. Has anyone else been to En Gedi? I know Debbie has. This is where the story is, right? Okay. So one of the things about En Gedi is that it's an oasis, or not an oasis. It's a water. There's water available. Okay, and in fact, I know of at least one church in Michigan that's called En Gedi Church. That there's this water in the midst of this desert, kind of thing, and it's fairly large. And Debbie and I went there on a trip to Israel in 2017 with Ray Vanderlyn, and it was an interesting. It was a fascinating trip. It was an amazing trip. Ray Vanderlyn had been there like 275 times, and he had a very definite set of goals and things that were supposed to happen every single day. Okay, not everything always worked out, and the one thing that didn't work out was that he was expecting and anticipating that the weather would be extremely hot. Okay, he was expecting it to be like in the 90s, even into the hundreds. Okay, I mean, he sent out videos ahead of time, saying, the temperature where it is right now is 110 degrees or something like that. You can carry all this water, and you go, right? And so the goal of this day, so we were to imagine how refreshing it is to see water, an abundance of water on an outrageously hot day. So he had us walking all through this desert area for an hour or two or three, right? With no stops, no breaks. Okay. And then we were supposed to go, what it is, like a hot day, right? I just want a break. I just want something to cool down. For a pool, right? And we were supposed to come down. You come down this hill and go around, and then you like make a turn, and all of a sudden, boom, there's this huge waterfall. There's a nice, beautiful waterfall, nice pool of water, and everybody is supposed to be so thrilled at the idea that there's this, you're sweating, you're dying, it's like anything, that everybody's going to want to just jump into the water. Okay. Now the problem was, the weather was like in the mid 70s. It was beautiful, and I don't know that I've ever heard anyone complain so much about good weather as Ray Vanderlyn did. Okay, because we can't, he had kind of hinted that this is how this was going to go, right? So we came, doing this walk, and I'm like, it's a beautiful day, a lovely day, and so then we did the whole thing. We came down into the water, and now at this point, we're all supposed to be out of a sense of outrageous relief at being cooled down. We're going to say, throw ourselves into the water to cool off, and so we get the idea of the refreshment of the Lord that the Lord provides to those in difficult circumstances. It's a beautiful picture, okay? And it would have worked perfectly if it had been 110 degrees, okay? But it wasn't 110 degrees. It was like 70 degrees, okay? And some of the people in the group, people like, I don't know, me, were going, I'm good. I'm good. I don't really feel like getting all wet and having to deal with wet clothes for the whole day, kind of thing. Other people, like, I don't know, Debbie, were like, hey, I'm in this for every bit. I'm going in.
I've been in the waters of En Gedi.
I stood in the waters. Okay, I'll stand in it, but you're supposed to go in. stand under the waterfall, get refreshed. So we got pictures. I was looking at them the other day. If I had to, this all set up, I would, here's Debbie under a waterfall kind of thing. But it was, so I've been there. Again, it's a place in the desert where there's refreshment, where there's waterfall, and it kind of it's picturesque, or it kind of symbolizes that relief that God gives. Okay, and again, there's a church called En Gedi Church in Michigan, and maybe more. There's probably more than one, kind of thing. But that's where David is hiding. Okay, so he's hiding from David, or he's hiding, and Saul is still chasing him. Okay, any questions so far? So we know, so Saul is like, here's that David is down there. He's got somebody looking for him. Now this is where you turn the page over. Okay. After Saul returned from pursuing the Philistines, he was told, David is in the desert of En Gedi. So Saul took 3,000 able young men from all Israel and set out to look for David and his men near the crags of the wild goats. Okay. So Saul is able to pick out 3,000 able young men, 3,000 of them. Okay. David has how many? 600. So it's a 5-to-1 advantage. Okay, that's a big advantage. I mean, David can have some really good, and David's men are not necessarily the crack extreme fighters, soldiers. Remember what we talked about? They're those that are in debt, disappointed, disillusioned, whatever, like the outcasts. Okay, so there's a 5-to-1 advantage that Saul has, and Saul has the Ziphites on his side, working for him, right? And so he goes down to find Saul. He came to the sheep pens along the way. Okay, so he's traveling down. He came to the sheep pens along the way. A cave was there, and Saul went in to relieve himself. So Saul, after dealing with the Philistines, follows David to En Gedi. He chooses 3,000 able, very young men, a 5-to-1 advantage over David's crew. And it just so happens that David and his crew are hiding deep in a cave in the area. While passing by, Saul feels nature's call and enters the very same cave. Okay, so let's be clear what's going on here. Okay, Saul is relieving himself. He's using the bathroom. He's, probably doing a number 2. Should I be more graphic? What's going on here? Okay, which is typical in Israel. That's, you got to go. You find a cave. When we were in Israel, okay, public bathrooms where we were going were few and far between. So we would be walking along in the middle of the desert somewhere, and at some point, Ray Vanderlyn would stop, blow the whistle or whatever, and say, all right, we're going to do a bathroom break. Men, go that way. Women, go that way. Okay? You guys want to know how exciting it was? Talk to Debbie. She'll be more than happy to explain it to you. Okay? Go do your business over there. Men, go do your business over there. Okay? And that's what we did. Okay? And so Saul is in there. And so as I imagine this, Saul is going into the bathroom. He's going in there to relieve himself. Okay? I mean, literally, the Hebrew is like cover your feet, which is how the expression that, once you did your business, you would like cover it up so people didn't know, kind of thing. So as I imagine what's going on is Saul takes his robe off, sets it on a rock, walks a little bit further in, gets out his book to read, he's watching movies on his phone. I don't know what he's doing, but he's occupied, he's busy, he's deep in thought. Okay, you guys know what I'm talking about, right? He's in there taking care of things. Okay, that's what's going on. Okay, David is in the back of the cave, and they see Saul. They see what's going on because they've got Saul is looking into a dark cave, so they don't see. David is looking out, so he sees the light. He sees Saul coming in, and he knows it's Saul because 1, he's very tall. 2, because he's got the royal robe on, and he's his father-in-law, right? So he comes in close enough to see what he's doing, sets down his robe, moves over to the side, okay, or goes further back in or whatever to do his to take care of nature's call. Okay, David and his men were far back in the cave. The men said, "This is the day the Lord spoke of when he said to you, I will give your enemy into your hands for you to deal with as you wish." Okay. So David's men see an opportunity and encourage him with an extra biblical quotation. Okay, so this isn't in the Bible anywhere. There's no record in the Bible of the Lord speaking to David and saying this. Okay, so did he? Did the Lord say it? Maybe. Not saying he did or he didn't. And I'm just saying this is not in the Bible, other than this point right here, where the men are telling David, "Hey," and David said, "Hey, this is your chance. I mean, there isn't a much easier time to kill someone than when he's doing his business. There's at least one king in the book of Judges who dies around the same time. He's in his closet, they say, in his closet, when the guy comes in and kills him. But so David crept up unnoticed and cut off a corner of Saul's robe. So he picks up he comes in, he sees the royal robe, he cuts off a corner of it. Okay. David sneaks out and cuts a corner off of Saul's robe, which some argue, now this is an interesting perspective, some argue is a royal robe exclusively for the king, and David is symbolically cutting Saul off from his kingdom. Okay, that you people shouldn't be able to get that close to the king. Agree? Yes? No? Maybe? I'm in the maybe. I mean, that's an interesting. I don't know that that's what Saul. I don't think that David was thinking. How can I symbolically tell Saul that he's doomed? I don't think so. Okay, I think David is just kind of making things up as he goes. Okay, but he figures, all right, but he is not going to harm the Lord's anointed. So, where am I here? This is the day the Lord spake. Then David crept up unnoticed and cut off a piece of Saul's robe. Afterwards, David was conscience stricken for having cut off a corner of his robe. He said to his men, because I'm guessing that David has his knife or his sword or whatever, and he's okay. Quiet. Okay, I'm gonna go. And he goes, and they expect to hear the sound effects of somebody being killed, blood, whatever. I'm going to insert on the film. I'm going to insert all kinds of bloody sound effects. But and instead, David comes back with a piece of cloth. Look what I did. Okay. Now, keep in mind, David's men are on the run too. Okay, they're wanted as well. Okay, they're not in positions of power. If David dies, they die. If David succeeds, they succeed. Okay, so they have a vested interest in getting rid of Saul. This is why David has to say to them, the Lord forbid that I should do such a thing to my master, the Lord's anointed, or lay my hand on him, for he is the anointed of the Lord. So David has to guys, down boy. No, we're not going to do this. With these words, David sharply rebuked his men and did not allow them to attack Saul. Now keep in mind, this conversation is going on in the cave while Saul is apparently still over there. Saul was really, whatever TikTok reel he was on was really interesting, because he was not, exact timing, I don't know, but he's having this conversation. Maybe, Lord forbid that I do this. No, stop it. Quit asking. Sort of thing. Okay. And Saul left the cave and went his way, not noticing that a corner of his robe had been cut off. Because why would he? He wasn't, the cave is dark, right? So he puts the robe on, he gets up, he walks out of the cave. Then David went out of the cave and called out to Saul. So David is conscience stricken over the act. Then he has to restrain his men and keep them from attacking Saul. And then in parentheses there, his men are on the run too. They're in this as well. Okay. So now we get David's longest recorded speech in the Old Testament. His longest uninterrupted speech in the Old Testament. Right here. This is it. Okay. And I'll going to give away something. Saul's response is Saul's longest recorded speech in the Old Testament. Now they have longer conversations. This person said this and reply and reply. But as far as a single speech, and so David, now you can imagine the scene. I'm guessing that the cave is some distance away. I mean, not like a mile, but a few hundred feet away from where the army is. And so David Saul comes out, comes down the trail, whatever, and then David comes out behind him. So now Saul is just coming out of this cave. Okay, maybe his eyes are still focusing on the light or whatever. Maybe he's older. Maybe he has cataracts. I don't know. Just found out that my younger sister has cataracts. I'm like, hey, I've managed to steer clear of the cataract club. Anybody here in the cataract club? I don't know. Maybe Saul is in the cataract club at this point. He's not seeing too well, but he's coming down. The army is further away, too far to run up the, because they've got kind of the on the hill advantage, I guess. He has the upper ground. David has the upper ground. So now you've got Saul in the middle. You've got David up there. You've got the army too far away to do anything quickly. And David yells out to him, "My lord the king." When Saul looked behind him, David bowed down and prostrated himself with his face to the ground. He said to Saul, "Why do you listen when men say, 'David is bent on harming you'? This day you have seen with your own eyes how the Lord delivered you into my hands in the cave. Some urged me to kill you, but I spared you. I said, I will not lay my hand on my Lord, because he is the Lord's anointed. See, my father, look at this piece of robe in my hand. I cut off the corner of your robe, but did not kill you. See that there is nothing in my hand that indicates that I am guilty of wrongdoing or rebellion. I have not wronged you, but you are hunting me down to take my life." Again, the army is hearing this. Okay. "May the Lord judge between you and me, and may the Lord avenge the wrongs you have done to me, but my hand will not touch you. As the old saying goes, from evildoers come evil deeds, so my hand will not touch you. Against whom has the king of Israel come out? Who are you pursuing? A dead dog? A flea? May the Lord be our judge and decide between us. May he consider my cause and uphold it. May he vindicate me by delivering me from your hand." Does that sound like Psalm 54? A couple of phrases in there similar to the Lord will judge, the Lord will avenge kind of thing. Okay. And notice what he says. He says a lot of stuff, amongst which includes he acknowledges Saul's kingship. My lord the king, and bows. He makes it clear who the king is, right? My lord the king. He doesn't blame Saul directly, at least not at first. He says, why do you listen when men say? Okay. One of the things about U.S. history is that in the American Revolution is that for the longest time, the colonists kind of thought it was Parliament and the king doesn't know about what's going on. So one of the reasons why they didn't attack earlier is because they figured, well, it's just Parliament, the king doesn't know. But it's finally when they realized the king knew, it's like, okay, the king's behind this. Okay. Or as Hamlet says at the end, the king's to blame, kind of thing. But he doesn't blame Saul directly. He reminds Saul that he could have killed him, but didn't. He does this twice. First of all, the fact that he just walks out of the cave that Saul just spent some quality time in is a pretty clear indication that he could have done something. But then he says, look, see how close I got to you. Okay, if you didn't believe me, look how close I got to you. Okay. He reminds Saul that some wanted him to kill him. My men want me to kill you. The only reason you're alive is because of me. It's not a question of I could have killed you and didn't. You're the only reason you're alive. I'm the only reason that you're alive at this point. He reminds Saul that some wanted. He acknowledges that he's the Lord's anointed. He says the Lord will avenge him. He promises that David, will not touch him. I will not touch you. Okay. David then uses an extra biblical saying. Okay, he just says it's an old saying: "From evil doers come evil deeds." Not to be confused with "out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaketh," kind of thing. He then illustrates that he is no threat to Saul. What am I? A dead dog? A flea? I am nothing to you. I am not hindering your kingdom at all. You do whatever you want, however you want. I'm not going to touch you. When David finishes in 2:15, Saul replies with his longest recorded speech in the Old Testament. And his first thing he says is that your voice, David, my son? Now this is where you're like, how does he not? Or is he just kind of thinking of something? I got to say something. Got to kind of give myself time to think. Is that your voice, David, my son? And clearly he knows. Maybe he's too far away to focus. Maybe he just came out of a dark cave. But notice that as opposed to previous references, he uses his name. He doesn't turn around and say, oh, are you the son of Jesse? Okay. He recognizes he's caught. He's caught. David, my son, because, he's a son-in-law, right? So that was kind of son, my son. He says, and he wept aloud, you are more righteous than I. Again, what did Samuel tell Saul the kingdom was being given to somebody, what? Better than him. And Saul recognizes, you are more righteous than I. This is not the first time we've heard this kind of construction. You also hear it in Genesis 38, the story of Judah and Tamar. For those who remember, it's not a story you get heard in Sunday school very often, but it's Judah, wife, sleeps with a daughter-in-law, et cetera, et cetera. The daughter-in-law is impregnated by Judah, proves that Judah is the father, and she says, she is more righteous than I. And here Saul is saying, you are more righteous than I. You have treated me well, but I have treated you badly. You have just now told me about the good you did to me. The Lord delivered me into your hands. He recognizes that. But you did not kill me. When a man finds his enemy, does he let him get away unharmed? No, he doesn't. That's kind of the point of being an enemy, right? When you got the chance, you kill him. Okay? I know, and this is the key element here, may the Lord reward you well for the way you treated me. And then verse 20, the key admission, I know that you will surely be king. This is in front of the army, he's saying this. I know that you will surely be king. And that the kingdom of Israel will be established in your hands. Some suggest that it means furthered, improved. Or just, Saul is still kind of working through the nuts and bolts of getting these 12 tribes to work together. Maybe David is the one that's going to get it all to work. Now swear to me by the Lord that you will not kill off my descendants or wipe out my name from my father's family, which is essentially what Jonathan asked. Okay. So you are more righteous than I. Saul acknowledges that David could have killed him, but did not. I know that you will surely be king, and that Israel will be established, some say furthered, in your hands. He asks David not to kill off his family, and David agrees. And then finally, that you will not kill off my descendants. So David gave his oath to Samuel. Then Saul returned home, but David and his men went up to the stronghold. See, David doesn't believe him. And this is where I say, Saul goes home, David and his men don't. Cue the ominous music. Dun, 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 dun. Any questions? David is still on the run. David is still in the wilderness. Next week, we're going to talk about David's run-in with another fine-feathered friend, Nabal. Interesting way to find a wife, but we'll talk about that next week. That's a long story. I don't know if we'll get through past all of that till we get to the next time David stories his life. Any questions? All right, thank you very much. See you all next week.